First, live, local. This is Fox 12 Now.
Hello everyone, this is Fox 12 Now. I'm Greg Nibbler. As always, thanks for joining us. We are live streaming here from the Fox 12 Oregon newsroom, but whether you're watching us live or after the fact, thanks for doing so. You can, of course, get that from the Fox 12 Oregon app or KPTV.com, YouTube, or however you're finding us, whatever you're on. Thank you for doing so. Just want to always say that. Today, for this segment, we're going to be showing my interview with director and filmmaker and award-winning filmmaker at that, Chris Eyre. And he has a new documentary out about Jim Thorpe. It's called Lit by Lightning. Now, if you don't know who Jim Thorpe is, he was one of the probably greatest athletes of all time, particularly there in the first half of the 20th century, which is when he was involved in professional football, professional baseball, multiple gold medals at the Olympics, and lots of other amazing achievements, and a Native American on top of that. So this documentary covers a large portion of his life and just going through all that. And so we were able to sit down and speak to Chris just about this, about Jim Thorpe, about what it means, about what his legacy means, and just to find out a little bit more about the man himself. So let's jump right into it. Really excited, just to not only talk to you just in general, but also just about this film, about Jim Thorpe. And, just to start off, to lay the groundwork here, what was it that really drew you not only just to the story of Jim Thorpe, which is amazing in general, but drew you to want to create this film about him?
I think growing up, I knew the name Jim Thorpe, and years later, I would realize the significance of his name being called the greatest athlete ever, and he's one of the greatest Americans that ever lived. But I felt like that name, Jim Thorpe, was possibly fading in terms of the massive amount of information that we have and the massive news cycle that changes all the time. And all of a sudden, I remember I was on set of Dark Winds, which I direct and produce, and there was a young Native American PA, and I said, Jim Thorpe. And they said, who? And I said, oh my God, I need to tell you about Jim Thorpe. And from that point, then I got a call from, history and LeBron James and Maverick Carter, and it was, would you like to be involved in a documentary? And I said, anything on Jim Thorpe, I am 100% in. So I joined that team, and we have incredible researchers and writers and historians and native scholars and, all sorts of people that helped out and gave all the backbone to this. But I was more taken by who is this enigmatic Native American sack and fox figure named Jim Thorpe that I heard about, in grade school with the mismatched shoes, and he ran the Olympics and won in 2 shoes he found in the trash can in Sweden because an opponent had stolen his shoes. And once I started to dig into it, I said to myself, everybody needs to know this story. All Americans need to know this because it's an inspiration to everybody, what people overcome, the circumstances of their situation, and where they can be triumphant. So, Jim Thorpe is a dream come true to be able to tell this story, to be able to have it called Lit by Lightning. His tribal name was Bright Path. And to bring this to new audiences, I think is my job as a filmmaker.
I mean, I think that's the perfect example of, there's somebody on set, this person not knowing the name Jim Thorpe. So getting that out there too, and knowing that he's one of the greatest athletes of all times, as you mentioned, one of the greatest Americans of all time, just an amazing person. But finding, going through this, as you're researching this, what were some of the most surprising things that you found out that you didn't know about Jim Thorpe?
Well, I mean, his life is so epic. One of the biggest issues was, what do we tell about his life? And for me as a native filmmaker, I wanted people to know about his victories and his triumphs in athletics. There are parts of this documentary that focus on the racism of the time, the bias of the time that he overcame, but that isn't the story that I was focused on. I was focused on, let's talk about the facts in terms of why it is that you should know his name. You know, he started out at the Carlisle Industrial Indian School. He became a football and track phenomenon where the newspapers started to write about him when he beat teams like Penn State. He beat Harvard as the only scorer of the Carlisle Indians. He rushed for 173 yards. He was put in newspapers. He beat Army with Dwight Eisenhower, famously, who would become president and whose fathers had fought in the Indian Wars just a generation before, you know, killing each other. Wow. And he lost his twin brother at 9. He lost both parents by age 11. He was taken from his community and put in Haskell boarding school before Carlisle. He ran away multiple times. They finally took him to Carlisle, and they took him so far away he couldn't run away. So I think based on those kind of circumstances, you either sink or swim. And I don't focus on these biases and the racism of the time. I focus on the facts of his of why he's known in sports. And basically, you know, as a native filmmaker, I think the point of pride that I find in his story is no matter where you come from, it's always about putting one foot in front of the other. No matter where you are or who you are, it's always about not comparing as much as it's about getting up, the number of times that you get knocked down. And I think Jim Thorpe embodies that. He was a great ballroom dancer, championship ballroom dancer. He played professional baseball. He played in what would be the NFL later and won 9 Canton Bulldog titles. He won 2 gold medals, the pentathlon and the decathlon, which had 15 events in it. He was in over 100 movies. He's in the movie King Kong in the 30s. He was a day laborer in the 50s. So he kept reinventing himself and never quitting, never looking at his life and saying, wow, woe is me. He just kept moving forward and making the best out of it and excelling and winning. And I think that he's a point of inspiration for all Americans because of what he did and overcame.
I mean, yeah, that right there is just so inspiring. I mean, you think about that, you know, as you mentioned, there's all those things against, you know, that could really crush a person that he had in his real life. But to be able to accomplish those things, and also, you know, as an athlete doing all those things, I mean, he's obviously amazingly physically gifted, but you still have that mental side. And he was just like, nah, that's not going to affect me. I'm just going to go out and do these things and set that aside. And yeah, I think that's just so incredibly inspiring. When you look at this film and, you know, going back to kind of what you were talking about with the, you know, the person on the set on Dark Woods who didn't know Jim Thorpe, you know, thinking about maybe that generation and some of the maybe younger people who don't know Jim Thorpe, didn't even know the name, and they're watching this. You know, when they watch this, what do you want them to take away from seeing this, from hearing this story from somebody who was, you know, 100 years ago or, you know, during that time frame?
I think I want them to take away from this, and all Americans to take away, that we are better for the sum of our parts and the tenacity that we all embody as individuals, and we all come together to make this great country and this great place at the behest of giving to one another and helping one another. And Jim Thorpe didn't dwell on his misgivings or where he came from. He literally had the tenacity and the perseverance of working hard, possibly being gifted, and just never quitting on himself. And I think that's a point of inspiration for everybody, which is it's not about comparing yourself. It's about doing because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. Well, it's incredibly inspiring and, you know, amazing story. And of course, you know, you being the person to tell it actually just makes it even better. Well, Chris, you know, thank you for having time to talk to us about this too, and for creating this and for getting this out there. I'm so excited. I mean, I love I love hearing, the full story of things that I didn't know before, and finding out more about Jim Thorpe and just the incredible legend that he is. Anything else that you think people should know just about the documentary?
I just think the documentary is incredibly entertaining. Jim Thorpe was never a woe is me character. He's a man who got up and worked and worked and worked and believed in what he was doing, and he ascended to be the greatest athlete ever. People should know that. And he's a point of inspiration because he was one of the greatest Americans that ever lived.
Yeah, for everybody. Well, Chris, thank you very much for having time. I really appreciate it, and thanks for doing what you do.
Thanks for having me, and I really hope people enjoy the show.
All right, again, a huge thank you to having Chris Eyre there on the show for joining us for that. And if you didn't hear that one part, so this documentary was also executive produced by LeBron James and Maverick Carter. And it will premiere on the National Geographic Channel on today, July 7th, depending on when you're watching this. So July 7th is the date for that film, Lit by Lightning. And thank you, everybody, for joining us here on Fox 12 Now. We have lots of segments for you to check out at our website, as I mentioned before, on our app, and or whatever platform you happen to be on and are finding us right now. So feel free to share these segments, and you can send us an email, fox12now at kptv.com. That's fox12now at kptv.com. And let us know what you think of this, or if you have another segment or an interview or something that you would like to send to us and consider for a possible segment here on Fox 12 Now, please feel free to do so. But that's it. We will talk to you soon. I'm Greg Nibbler.